Dean.
Good morning. Welcome to the United States Sports Academy and our weekly sports talk program. This morning I have with me Dr. Fred Cromartie, our Director of Doctoral Studies, and Dr. Brett Simmermacher, our Chair of Sports Coaching. And of course, as always, our wonderful producer Sarah Weber is behind the camera, making sure everything goes well. Most of you have probably heard about what happened with Maria Sharapova, big announcement she made on Monday. When I first heard that she was going to make a big announcement, I thought she might be retiring. I'm thinking to myself, that'd be a stupid day to announce your retirement on the same day as Peyton Manning. Yeah. But it turned out that she wasn't announcing her retirement. She was announcing that she had tested positive for a drug called meldonium at the Australian Open. Now we're kind of use Maria Sharapova as the context, but we're not really going to talk about her specifically. We're going to talk more about prescription drugs and athletes and how the two sometimes don't go together. The drug she took her reason or excuse, however you want to look at it, is that she took it under the name Mildronate, which is basically the same drug, and she claimed she didn't realize that it was meldonium is the one on the banned substance list, and Mildronate's the one she took. And the other thing is that she'd been taking the drugs for about 10 years. It was prescribed by a physician due to immune deficiency, abnormal EKG, diabetes indicators, low magnesium, and asthenia. And asthenia is the most common ailment treated by the drug.
So it does absolutely nothing for diabetes. The fact of the matter is that she has been living here in the United States for a prolonged period of time. The drug is not available in the United States. It's only available over in Russia, and it was prescribed by a Russian doctor. So let's get that out there and let everybody know that information. It's not available to be prescribed by doctors here in the United States.
Most of what you said is true. It is available in the United States. It's just not approved by the FDA.
It can't be prescriptive.
It can't be prescribed by a doctor, but you can get it.
Illegally.
Well, you know, and part of this.
Maybe it was shipped to her house.
Part of this thing is the whole cloud that's over her native country of Russia.
Well, it's not just the cloud over Russia, it's the cloud over tennis. I mean, it has been known and said for years that people thought that there were certain players within tennis that were taking drugs. There are certain players that are tanking matches. I mean, there's a whole cloud out there over the World Tennis Association.
Yeah, but tanking matches and taking drugs are
bribery.
Totally unrelated. And there's no evidence that this drug is a performance enhancer. In fact, even the World Anti-Doping Association, they added to their list, and this is a direct quote from WADA, because of evidence of its use by athletes with the intention of enhancing performance. So WADA isn't even convinced that it enhances performance. So and I guess.
Well, I think one of the other things that you have to understand too, her reasoning was that she didn't open up an email and it came in January and that, well, according to WADA themselves, when they do ban substances, that new list is sent out to the athletes the September prior. So she was notified in September, so you're talking October, November, and December, she could have found out.
Yeah, but obviously athletes are responsible for what they do in their body, but I've seen the WADA banned substance list.
Yeah, I've seen it too.
It's kind of like the tax code. And you can't expect an athlete but somebody has to jump in and tell her that, no, you can't do this.
She's surrounded by people that should have been able to inform her.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
I mean, and that's the other thing. People are saying, oh, what a great thing it was that she stood up and she owned up to this. She had no choice.
Yeah, she did. She could have announced her retirement and just gone away.
Okay, but still, the fact of the matter is that she was popped for this substance, and you can't. She couldn't turn away from that.
It wouldn't have been if she would announced her retirement. Nobody would have cared. That would have been just a non-player when they announced.
Well, actually, no. The WTA still would have had said because a lot of players decide after a year or two they're going to come back. They would have still had to mandate, which they're going to have to right now, to say what the term is for her suspension: 2, 4, 6, 8 years.
I'm on the board of directors. I'm the lead director for the Big Sur National Marathon, and we had a runner a couple years ago from Morocco who had tested positive and was banned for 2 years by IAAF.
Yeah,
The
IAAF.
Yeah, IAAF. And he had done absolutely nothing wrong. He had had prescription medication. He had done everything that he was supposed to do, but his doctor screwed up the paperwork. And he was taking a substance that was prescribed for obvious medical reasons. You know, I had a soldier that worked for me when I was in the Air Force, Army captain, and he had to take steroids to breathe. And so, you know, he was a big guy too. So he lifted weights and he was a huge guy, but the steroids made him even bigger. But you know, in that case, if he would have been an athlete, or one of the questions I have is, why should athletes not be allowed to get the best medical care that's available to you, me, and Brett just because they're athletes? If the best medical care to treat a person who actually has an issue is on the banned list, what should that athlete do?
But see, that's up to each individual league because they are allowed to get the best medical care. And I hate to go back in history, but remember, there was all kinds of controversy over Lance Armstrong being treated for his, you know, testicular cancer and the drugs that he was getting in that. But at the time, cycling said, hey, it is a proven factor that this man has testicular cancer. He's being treated by physicians, and they let it go. He's got to be treated. Now, it was afterwards that some of this other stuff came out and everything that sort of tainted it. So athletes are allowed to, you know, get the best possible medical care. But what they're saying, though, too, is that if you're working with your physician, your medical team, and that, make sure that those people have an understanding as to what is banned by us.
And the one thing an athlete can always do is ask the question.
Yeah. You can't go wrong if you ask the question.
That's right. You know, there was we had another athlete who in our race that finished 7th in the New York City Marathon on the 6th of November. I think it was either 2011 or 2012. He finished 7th in the New York City Marathon on the 6th of November. He won our race on the 20th of November, which was 2 weeks later. And he tested positive at New York City. But the weird thing was they didn't make the announcement until the 31st of May. So 6 months after the fact, they made the announcement. So we had to go back and get his money back and then write checks to the second through 9th finishers who moved up through 1 through 8. You know, the difference in the prize money. And he got popped for EPO. And I think one of the things about performance-enhancing drugs, I don't think, and I'm not a scientist, I don't know the details, but I don't think EPO helps you run faster. But I think EPO allows you to run a 1 hour and 2 minute half marathon 2 weeks after you run a 2 hour and 6 minute marathon. You know, the recovery.
It's faster.
Yeah.
It helps them. You know, and I believe that's why, you know, if you look at all the people in baseball, that Clemens, A-Rod, they're already elite athletes.
Pettit.
They're already elite athletes. They're trying to get that edge to get a few more years on their contract. But it's not proven that steroids makes them a better baseball player.
No.
There's a lot of skill that's involved in the game of baseball.
In fact, there's not one shred of evidence that says steroids help you as a baseball player.
Right. So, you know, if they choose to put that in their system to make themselves healthy and it's prescribed by a doctor and they're under medical care, and that's the choice that they make.
But I think it's like you said from the very beginning. These guys are trying in the era of money,
Right.
and I mean big money.
Money rules.
These
everything.
guys are trying to stretch out every additional year that they possibly can because that is still millions and millions of dollars. It's a classic example. Peyton Manning was due $19 million. I don't care if he's 30, 40, 49, 50 years old. If he had something to offer in terms of his skill set as an elite quarterback that he was 5 years ago, he'd still be playing in the NFL today. Because that's what it's all about. It's about what you bring to the table for the team, and if you have it, they'll pay you for it.
Yeah, he retired so he could be compelled to testify in the HGH
Well, if he does, he's gonna say his wife got it.
That's a
We've already gone down that road
That's a
before.
subject
That's a
matter.
rather common story.
You know, there was a kid a 16-year-old kid in the 1972 Olympics named Rick DeMott, and I remember this, and I remember how bad how mad it made me in 1972. He was taking an asthma medication, won the 400 meters, won the gold medal in the 400 meters, and then was disqualified and was not allowed to race in the 1500 meters, which is actually his best event.
Yeah.
He was the current world record holder at that time. And this was another case where he had done everything. He personally had done everything exactly right. And the United States Olympic Committee screwed up his paperwork and didn't do what they needed to do
With the IOC.
with the IOC and cost this kid probably 2 gold medals.
And a ton of money.
Right.
And the IOC or the USOC messed that up, and they still probably today don't take any responsibility. And that's sad.
No, that's not true. They did take responsibility in 2001, which was what, 29 years
Okay,
ago.
29.
Okay.
And they appealed to the IOC to get his gold medal reinstated. And those gold medals have been reinstated before. Jim Thorpe was a classic example. But the interesting thing is that was 15 years ago now that they made that appeal, and the IOC has not ruled. They have not said no, and they have not said yes. They've just not ruled on it, kind of like Bud Selig. They repeat those.
Yeah,
For 30
there'll be no
years.
decision made.
Yeah. Well, Brett mentioned this before, baseball. One of the things I think is interesting about baseball is when they talk about steroids. A-Rod's coming up on 700 home runs,
Mhm.
and he's only 27 away from that magic number of 714, which was the magic number when we were kids.
Right.
But people always point out that the time when A-Rod is admitted to using steroids was in Texas, and they talk about the difference in home runs between how many more home runs he had when he went to Texas. However, if you look at baseball statistics, you go to reference.com and all these other great sites that are out there. You could look at baseball statistics from now till you die. There's so many out there. But the interesting thing about A-Rod going from Seattle to Texas, the average home runs per game between those two ballparks, his home run totals actually went up less than they should have simply by moving from the ballpark in Seattle to the ballpark in Texas. So you can't use that.
Well, he played in the Kingdom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, and in Texas when he moved too, they didn't have the new ballpark.
Right, but I heard a great, it'll never happen, but it was a scientist who was talking on ESPN, and his idea is to give everybody who played baseball in the 90s full immunity and have them say exactly what they did and when they did it. So then you got like Brady Anderson, whose career high was 17 home runs, and all of a sudden he comes in with a 51,
Right.
and then he never comes close to that again. If he wasn't doing anything that year, maybe he just had a good year. Barry Bonds that's another example of people always bring for steroids. Barry Bonds, tremendous growth, and we've got a student who's doing a doctoral dissertation right now. Barry Bonds' tremendous growth in home runs came at the exact same time he switched from an ash bat to a maple bat.
Maple bat.
And they do have scientific evidence that a maple bat hits a ball farther than an ash bat. So, and a lot of people forget too, in this 1970, in the season where Barry Bonds hit 73 home runs, near the end of the season when everybody's getting tired, they had 10 days off because of 9/11.
Mhm.
So he got a little bit of rest and hit a bunch of home runs that last week. We're getting in this Olympic year, we hear a lot about doping in Olympics, and I think most people think that performance-enhancing drugs are just rampant in the Olympics. And I will admit, when I found this chart online, I was actually a little bit surprised because
When I was looking at it, I was surprised.
they've had, since 1968, they've tested a total of 26,000. This is the Summer Olympics. They tested a total of 26,900 athletes, and 114 of them have tested positive, and that's a 0.42%. So those people that think that the Olympic villages are just rampant with performance-enhancing drugs, that's not quite true. Now, what I will say as a caveat to that is most of these athletes are really smart,
Yes.
and they know the latest date you can take performance-enhancing drugs prior to a big competition and still pass. But still, to have less than 0.5% test positive in the Olympics over
Well, it goes back to the procedural processes that they do at these games as well, because it goes all the way back to the Ben Johnson case. Ben Johnson did not test positive at that Olympiad
Was after the fact.
before.
Before.
Yeah. So that's one of the things. They say he tested positive at that Olympiad.
So-
He did not.
One of the things that's I'm a little skeptical about is that big zero in the Moscow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
1980 Olympics.
That was
Well,
one
that's
of the
because-
things that I focused in on too.
Yeah, 0% and 0 people tested positive. Of course, the United States and a lot of other countries boycotted
Yeah.
those Olympics because of their invasion of
It was
Afghanistan.
also the
Well,
lowest number tested.
And this Olympiad, even though we're still going to have the testing and everything, Rio 2016, I think we have far more concerns to worry about now out there with the Zika virus and the severity of the water contamination and that's one of the things when you said before, the IOC doesn't make decisions of that. Well, it's not just the IOC, it's the IOC, USOC, all of these other nations, Olympic committees are going to have to make a decision in regards to the overall safety of those athletes.
Sure.
This is one of the first Olympiads where we know of that there are potential, there's a potential out there for some of these athletes to contract diseases and get sick and die.
Yeah. Well, even in Beijing, there were a lot of distance runners who didn't go because of the
The air quality, the smoke, heavy smoke.
They just didn't want to go. We're coming up to our time limit here. We want to thank everybody for joining us each week. Next week, we have a very special show. John Lieber, who pitched 14 years in the major leagues, was a 20-game winner in the major leagues, pitched in the postseason for the 2004 New York Yankees, and had a great career in baseball.
Go Cubs.
Played at the University of South Alabama.
He's from Iowa, played at a community college in Iowa, and then transferred to South Alabama, had a great career there. And obviously, anytime you pitch for 14 years in the major leagues, you've had an outstanding career. So John Lieber is going to join us next week. And
you'll ask him his opinion on March Madness.
Yeah.
Brackets will get released.
We'll ask him a couple of basketball questions maybe, because he'll be in here, 3 days after the brackets are announced, and we'll all be filling out our brackets. So anyway, join us next week for a very special show with former Major League pitcher John Lieber, and we will hope everybody has a good week in sports. We'll be looking forward to bracket Sunday this week and see how Joe Lenardi gets 68 out of 68 again.
The women's too.
Well, the women's.
Women's on some Monday.
Monday.
Monday, the bracket come out. And,
Yeah.
Show is earlier this
Sunday
year,
and
about
Monday.
4:30.
Number 1 overall seed will be.
I think.
Oh, for the women?
Yeah.
Well, the number 1 overall seed for both is going to be UConn women.
I was driving home from. I went and watched. A buddy of mine's a softball coach at Niceville High School, and I went and watched him play that game. And I was driving home and I was listening to ESPN radio, and it was the Big East Women's Championship game between St. John's and Creighton. And
St. John's
one of the announcers, when you talk at ESPN radio, St. John's and Creighton, you're down to your 20th best announcing duo.
Right.
So there are 2 people I honestly never heard either one of their names, but one of them made the comment. He said, "Let's face the facts. Everybody knows that they're playing for second place in the women's tournament." So anyway, we hope everybody has a great week. Remember the advice we gave you a couple weeks ago. Fill out your brackets this year in Tinsel with a good eraser, so that you can fix your bracket after the first round. And we'll see you next Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time with former Major League star John Lieber. Have a great week.